sets us free with the light that leads the blind to see. Voice of the word, voice for the good, voice of the hope, voice of the voice of the word, TV.
VWTV, ang telebisyon nga may misyon.
Voice of the World, TV.
Upay nga oras sa aton nga tanan mga brother knights. Welcome to our show Knights of Columbus Hour right here in the Voice of the Word Media Network in Borongan City. This is your brother Alvin Gonzalez, your State Public Relations Chair, saying maupay nga oras, and today is the celebration of our blessed Michael J. McGivney. He is the founder of the Knights of Columbus, and I want to greet all our brother knights who are watching today, who is in turn celebrating our founder's feast day, Blessed Michael McGivney, all over the world. I want to greet our brother knights in the Western Visayas, particularly the Diocese of Panay Island, Diocese of Iloilo, Haro, and then the Central Visayas, Archdiocese of Cebu, and in Siquijor, and in the Guimaras, Visayas, and Eastern Visayas, which is Tacloban, especially the Diocese of Calbayog, the Diocese of Naval, and the Diocese of our own, the Diocese of Batangan. And before we start, we have a video that we're going to show you. It is about it is a nightcast episode which we will be showing you later on. But first of all, gusto ko lang sanang basahin sa inyo ang message ng ating State Deputy Odel Mabutin about Blessed Michael McGivney, and this is how it goes. It's a message from our State Deputy Odel Mabutin. Visayas State Deputy official statement on the celebration of our founder's feast day, Blessed Michael J. McGivney, August 13, 2023. Worthy brothers, greetings of peace, love, and joy in our blessed founder's name. As we look back today, in effect, the 141st year of the founding of our honored order at St. Mary's Church, New Haven, Connecticut, USA. From a handful of men who joined the Knights of Columbus in 1882, it has grown to become the biggest Catholic organization of male faithful with more than 2 million members worldwide. It has reaped in humble service to humanity and our Mother Church successes year by year. As reported out by our worthy Supreme Knight Patrick A. Kelly last Columbian year 2022-2023, our order has donated $189 million, roughly 10 billion pesos, in war-torn Ukraine alone. We have shared already $21 million, and we too collectively have rendered 49 million man-hours within the same period. Over the years, countless officers and brother knights have sacrificed and offered their lives, all for the good name that our order stands for. We have every reason, therefore, today to celebrate and lift up to God every ounce of ourselves, and in communion with our brethren the world over, all what our order has done. On the other hand, guided by the spirit of synodality that the Universal Church espouses and pursues communion, participation, and mission. We need to do some individual soulful introspection, how far we have gone in faith and charity. This I say because our order has, in the just concluded 141st Supreme Convention in Orlando, Florida, on August 1 to 3, 2023, declared this year's theme as First in Faith and Charity. First in Faith and Charity. Simply put, with all humility and prayerful thoughts, as well meaning brothers, I most fervently invite you to this year to put in more sense of seriousness and responsibility, dedication and commitment to our being a brother knight. We need to give our best in terms of membership growth and implementation of our Faith in Action programs, especially the newly launched CORE initiative. This way, we will be truly living out again our revered cardinal virtues of charity, fraternity, unity, and patriotism. Let us walk the talk. Let us pray to God with authentic, contrite spirit. In our own small way, He makes us the best knight that we each could ever be this fraternal year and beyond. Always ready to share our talent, time, and treasure, no matter what the cost is. As Saint Mother Teresa aptly put it, we can do small things with great love. Let us rejoice, for this is the day that the Lord has made for our founder and all of us brothers and our families, as well as the whole Christendom. Viva Beato Padre Miguel Magdivni! Vivat Jesus! Magsadya ta, maglipay ta, magrayhak kita. Super salamat po, yours fraternally, Brother Odilon S. Mabutin, Visayas State Deputy. Daghang kaayong salamat, madamo gid nga salamat, damo duro nga salamat. Thank you, Brother Nice. This was the message sent by our State Deputy Odel Mabutin. So we're celebrating today. I have with me the icon of our Blessed Michael J. McGivney, founder of the Knights of Columbus. And before we start the video, let me just put some thoughts about the Nightcast, that video that we're going to play. 2 decades ago, the Knights of Columbus were dedicated to Our Lady of Guadalupe. In this episode of Nightcast, host Jonathan Reyes speaks with Supreme Knight Patrick Kelly about the Supreme Board's recent trip to Mexico City to rededicate the Order of Our Lady. He also speaks to other guests about the Knight's recent Marist poll on abortion, the Order's college councils, and the powerful story of intercession from a relative, Blessed Michael McGivney. Meron akong dito that got my attention. In one of these episodes, in one of these Nightcasts, we have a guy named Joseph McGivney, a relative of Blessed Michael McGivney, a Knight of Columbus, speak about his journey from alcohol abuse to healing. He discusses how he attributes his miraculous recovery to the intercession of Blessed McGivney. So we also have a segment that we get a sneak peek of the Knights of Columbus' latest film, In Solidarity with Ukraine, which follows the Order's relief work in Ukraine since the outbreak of war in the country. The more highlights is Nicholas Holomon, manager of College Councils, discusses the growth of College Councils in Canada and the United States, as well in the Philippines, in the presence of Sikh conferences attended by over 17,000 young Catholics. Tim Sukosia, Vice President of Public Policy for the Knights of Columbus, discusses the Order's latest Marist poll showing that nearly 7 out of 10 Americans support some restrictions on abortion. The news comes 6 months after the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade, and in a hopeful sign for the future of the pro-life movement in the United States. Well, okay, Brother Knights, let us watch this Nightcast video with me. And Brad Mark, please play the video. Thank you so much.
Hello and welcome to Nightcast. My name is Jonathan Reyes, Knights of Columbus Senior Vice President for Communications and Strategic Partnerships, and I'll be your host from here at the St. John Paul II National Shrine in Washington, D.C. Here on Nightcast, we hope to help you step into the breach as men, as Catholics, and as Knights. You can find this episode and all episodes on demand anytime by visiting kofc.org/Nightcast. You can also find Nightcast on Knights of Columbus social media channels, including YouTube. In this episode, we'll be talking to the Supreme Knight about the new Knights 150 strategic plan. We'll also be looking at the latest Knights of Columbus Marist poll on Americans' opinions on abortion, taking a look at the next generation of Knights, and much more. Thank you for joining us. During a recent Board of Directors pilgrimage to Mexico City, the Supreme Knight renewed the consecration of the Order to Mary under her title of Our Lady of Guadalupe at the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Here's a look at this important moment for the Knights of Columbus.
Today, the family of the Knights of Columbus comes to our Mother, Our Lady of Guadalupe, to reconsecrate ourselves, to reconsecrate our beloved order to her maternal guidance.
Mother of the civilization of love and Mother of the Knights of Columbus, pray for us.
The consecration 22 years ago this day has really been a gift that has rippled out through the entire order to all the countries where we're established. But it's even gone beyond that, and I would say it's broadened devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe throughout the whole world. Vivat Jesus and Viva Cristo Rey!
I'm joined now by Supreme Knight Patrick Kelly to talk about the renewal of the consecration of the Order to Our Lady, as well as the new Knights 150 strategic plan. Mr. Kelly, thanks as always for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jonathan. It's great to be with you.
So a number of things to talk about, but the first one I want to talk about is pretty exciting. You've recently returned from a trip to Mexico City with the Board of Directors, where you reconsecrated the Order to Our Lady of Guadalupe. Why is that so important for us as Knights? And maybe you can tell us a bit about that trip.
So I have to say it was so great to be in Mexico City and to be at the shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe, which is really, in many ways is the spiritual heart of Mexico. It was really important for me to go there with the Board of Directors to reconsecrate the order to Our Lady of Guadalupe. My predecessor, Carl Anderson, first consecrated the order to Our Lady 22 years ago in the Basilica. And so to be there and to reconsecrate the order, I felt it was very, very necessary to just renew that consecration, to put the order under her mantle of protection, under her mantle of maternal care, because she's so important to this continent, to really all of the Americas. She is patroness of the Americas. And so as Knights, I thought it was very important for us to do that.
One of the amazing things about Our Lady of Guadalupe is not just that she had this message of consolation, but her apparition actually led to the conversion of all of Mexico and continues to lead to conversion. So I just think it fits perfectly with so many of the things you've been saying, Mr. Kelly, about the Knights also as being out there to bring the gospel to the rest of the world.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, she's patroness of the Americas, right? And so we are, as Knights, we're so strong in Canada and the United States and in Mexico. So I think, for that reason also, it's very important for us to be under her mantle.
So we're approaching what is the 500th anniversary of the apparition. And given our close relationship with Our Lady, I'm sure we as Knights are thinking about doing something special. I wonder if you could say something about that.
In 2031, we'll be at the 500th anniversary of Our Lady of Guadalupe, 500 years since she appeared on the Tepeyac Hill in Mexico. And what we're looking at is a 9-year intercontinental novena to Our Lady of Guadalupe. We'll be talking about this more in the future as we firm up our plans, but I'm very excited about it to really have a 9-year devotion to Our Lady that leads us to this really important event, the 500th anniversary of her apparition, which, as you say, Jonathan, really led to the conversion of an entire continent.
Well, I look forward to hearing more about that on our next Nightcast, and we'll certainly keep viewers informed as that unrolls and gets unveiled. Let's take up a second topic that I think was a very important event for the Knights in a number of ways just in the last couple of weeks here. It was the unveiling, the launching of what's called Knights 150, which is the strategic plan for the Knights of Columbus going forward. This was a really important moment for the Knights of Columbus, and I wonder if you could tell us a bit about that.
It was a very important moment for us. And what this strategic plan does is it gives us a roadmap to plan our activities and to really think about how we approach the next decade. So the name of it, Knights 150, comes from our 150th anniversary, which will occur in 10 years. So what this does is it gives us a way to think about our vision and our mission, and then also have a plan for really kind of pushing our mission forward. And it gives us a way of organizing here at the Supreme Council how we're going to work and how we're going to really organize all of our efforts. I've said it in the past, but the Knights of Columbus is a very complex organization. So when you have that, you really need a plan. You need a plan to focus your energies and focus your attention. And that is really what Knights 150 is all about. It's about making sure that we are true to our mission and that we work in an organized way to achieve that over the course of the next few years.
You know, I know you worked with the board. I know you worked with senior leadership. I know that a lot of thought and energy went into this. But one of the things that really stood out to me was this clear articulation of mission and vision that I just think is so important. It captured exactly what Blessed Michael McGivney has always had us doing. And I thought maybe right now what we could do is turn to a video you made where you explain that mission and vision, and we can just take a look at it right now. And then after that, we'll resume our conversation.
When Father McGivney founded the Knights, he tackled the most pressing challenges facing the Catholic family and the Church. And in the principles of charity, unity, and fraternity, he gave us timeless ideals that can help us address society's most pressing needs. Each generation of Knights has answered the call issued by our blessed founder with courage, faith, and leadership. In our early years, when young men were losing their lives in factories, we cared for their widows and orphans. When anti-Catholic bigotry reared its ugly head, we showed that we could be both proud American citizens and proud of our Catholic faith. We deepened our leadership in the 20th century, raising the banner of patriotism through 2 world wars. And for the past 50 years, we have led the way in service for the sake of others. From providing coats for kids and food for families to strengthening Special Olympics, from supporting seminarians to ensuring that families have financial security, and from rebuilding Christian communities in the Middle East to standing strong with the people of Ukraine, we have proved in powerful ways that wherever there's a need, there's a Knight. We should all be proud of what we've done, and you have my deep gratitude for contributing so much to our work. But we should also ask ourselves, where do we go from here? After leading for so long in so many ways, where is God calling us next? Our future success firmly depends on our fidelity to Father McGivney's vision for the order. Our mission is this: the Knights of Columbus empowers Catholic men to live their faith and serve their family, parish, community, and country. This is who we've always been, and this is who we must continue to be across everything we do. This high-level statement of purpose is filled out by our vision, an articulation of what we are and what we strive to do. Our vision statement reads, founded by Blessed Michael McGivney in 1882, the Knights of Columbus is the premier lay Catholic men's organization. Guided by the principles of charity, unity, and fraternity, we build lifelong relationships with our members and families. We are multi-generational and international. We offer formation, mutual aid, and financial security to members through our charity, products, and outreach. We aspire to invite every man to join the Knights of Columbus and to extend our charitable reach as widely as possible.
So I think you did an excellent job laying out the mission and vision, and that's helpful to the whole organization for the next 10 years, all of us, every member, everyone who wants to know the Knights, even people who aren't Knights, they can see what we're all about. One of the priorities, which I think is extremely important, is the Knights should seek to become first in faith as in charity. Now that's really interesting. I wonder if you could comment on that.
The Knights are known for our charitable service. We do so much on a local and a national and even international level for charity. But where we want to go is we really want to form our men in their Catholic faith and give them opportunities to grow in their faith. This is an area where we know that men are very hungry for this kind of formation. And so what we're doing is we're giving men the opportunity through the Knights of Columbus to grow in their faith. I've talked in the past about our core meeting, which is many of our councils right now are in a pilot program, but it will allow our councils to have meetings at the parish for the men of the parish, not just Knights, but for the men of the parish to come together to grow in their faith. So this is an extremely important initiative. And we've already begun in this way, and many of our Knights will know this. I mean, with our Into the Breach video series, we've already started this. But over the course of the next year, we will be putting out another video series on marriage and family life. And we're currently working on a Bible study for men that our councils can take up in the context of the core meeting. So this is why I think that priority for the order to become first in faith as in charity is something that's really gonna push us to really grow in our faith and really be in service to the church even more than we always have been.
Exciting times. Thank you, Mr. Kelly, for your leadership. Thanks for spending some time with us and sharing your vision. And I look forward to the next chat we have on Nightcast.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jonathan. Appreciate it.
Ahead of this year's March for Life, the 2023 Knights of Columbus Marist poll on Americans' opinions on abortion was released. The survey showed that post-Roe, a majority of Americans continue to support legal limits on abortion. Let's take a closer look at this important poll.
For 15 years, the Knights of Columbus Marist poll has consistently found that a pro-life consensus exists among the American people. 6 months after the Dobbs decision, recent poll results remain encouraging. It shows that nearly 7 in 10 Americans support at least some restrictions on abortion. 91% support the mission of pregnancy centers. 78% of Americans oppose using taxpayer dollars to fund abortions abroad, and 60% in the United States. The results further show that 77% of Americans believe medical professionals should be able to follow their conscience when it comes to abortion. These are encouraging signs in this new phase of the pro-life movement. When it comes to the direction of government policy, a growing consensus of Americans are in favor of greater protections for the unborn. The Knights of Columbus will continue to stand for the dignity and worth of every human life.
I'm now joined by Knights of Columbus Vice President of Public Policy, Tim Sakosha, to talk about these latest poll numbers and the cause for life. Tim, thanks for being with us. Good to see you.
You too, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
So, maybe we should just start with saying, what is the Knights of Columbus Marist poll? Just give us some background on that and why it's so important.
Sure. So the Knights of Columbus have been partnering with the Marist Institute for Public Opinion based at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York, for about 15 years now. And what we've been trying to do for the last 15 years is to really do a deep dive study into what Americans' opinions on the abortion question really is. So, for instance, we know Gallup and a lot of other great polling outfits, they do these polls. We see them regularly. There's always one coming out. Are you pro-life? Are you pro-choice? And what we found over 15 years is that's not really answering the question of where most Americans are on this very critical and deeply dividing issue. And what our polling is actually finding is it's not deeply as dividing as sometimes we find. So we start with that question, but we go deeper. And we ask questions about particular policy, questions about particular limits, questions on state issues, federal issues, and so that we really now start understanding what Americans think. And I think it's critically important because that's not how this issue is often reported. And so we're able to add to that discussion, we're able to add to in an intelligent way to the debate so that we actually are talking from facts and not just suppositions on the issue.
So, Tim, I've heard you talk about this before, and you've mentioned something, you've used this phrase, pro-life consensus, and you said this has sort of been steady throughout. What do you mean by that, and what does it tell us about the last 15 years?
Sure. So after we ask that initial question of whether a respondent is pro-life or pro-choice, what we then ask is, okay, well, here are 6 possibilities for policy on the abortion issue. Which one comes closest to your opinion? So we ask, do you think it should be legal without limit? That it should be completely illegal? And then we ask a few questions in between as well. We call it our 6-way question. And what we've found consistently over the last 15 years is that if we draw a line around whether someone thinks there should be limits on abortion starting at 3 months or in extreme circumstances like the life of the mother or other such issues, we find that number comes in at or above 7 in 10 Americans. So this year, 69%, just about 7 in 10 Americans would favor policy that limits abortion to the first 3 months of pregnancy or only in extreme circumstances. But our pro-life and pro-choice question indicated that about 60% of Americans or so called themselves pro-choice. So what we're saying is that this isn't really answering the question on where the American people are, but that there's actually a pro-life consensus that most Americans kind of are innately leaning more in a pro-life direction on policy, and that we bring this up to our legislators, to the media, to our brother knights, to the American public, to let them know that really there's a bit more nuance to this issue than we're hearing about. And so we start there, and then we start diving a bit deeper. What does this really mean? So we ask questions about federal policy and other issues like taxpayer funding, where we find 60% of Americans don't support taxpayer dollars being used to fund abortion. So this would be the federal Hyde Amendment that I'm sure a lot of brother knights and listeners have heard about before, that restricts funding for abortion in the labor, health, and human services space, so Medicaid and other such programs like that. And this is something that is popular among the American people, but not maybe something that we hear about as often. So this consensus, we know, really kind of goes to the core of where the American people are, not just Catholics, not just Republicans, not just independents, but really a bipartisan consensus on the issue.
Did the Dobbs decision change any of this? I mean, we put Roe versus Wade aside. Did that change your polling?
So for this year, it didn't. In fact, actually, our numbers were about the same as they have been, that, again, being very consistent or better. We asked a question about whether laws should seek to protect the unborn child and the mother where possible. Typically, that's come in very strong in the low 80, 81, 82%. This year, it was over 90%. And so there are a lot of other numbers that have increased. The taxpayer support that I mentioned before have gone up as well. And so what we're finding is it's consistent or even a little bit better.
This strikes me as particularly important now, Tim, because as the conversation gets more emphasized at the state level, we're not abandoning the federal level. There's a lot to be done here. But now that we're having state conversations about these and state marches, which I want you to talk about a bit, tell me why it's so important we participate in those marches and why this information is now so important at the state level.
Yeah, I mean, so practically speaking, things are important at the state level and the federal level because what the Dobbs decision did, in its own words, is to return the issue to the people's elected representatives. And so that's state, federal. It's even in some areas where there may be opportunities, local, municipal situations as well. But at the state level, the states can regulate the medical profession, and so there's a lot of responsibility there on state legislatures to do that. Some states have responded in a pro-life direction. Some have responded in a way to expand abortion. And so then that also gets to the two issues you mentioned. One, federal need. There are federal issues like taxpayer funding, which has the support of 60% of Americans on domestic, over 70% when you go to international funding. So there's a federal role there for sure. But at the state level, we need to make sure voices are heard. And so, of course, we've marched in Washington now since 1974, and we'll continue to do so. But marching at the state capitals is important as well as state legislatures consider these legislative questions. But there's also a cultural kind of movement to it as well, to let legislators in red states, blue states, purple states know that people care about this issue. They care about it. They're pro-life, and they want their elected representatives to know about that.
You know, I think it's important you bring up Washington because there was some question, and you and I had these conversations with a lot of our friends about what's going to happen to the March for Life here in Washington after the Dobbs decision. After all, as you said, it was primarily a response to the Roe versus Wade decision. Were you surprised about what you saw here in January?
I wasn't. I always had hope that it would be one of the biggest, most successful marches in history, and I think it was. The march was started in 1974 in response to Roe. The organizers, thought it might just take a couple of marches to change the tide. There were talks of constitutional amendments in the earliest days after Roe, and of course that didn't happen. And so the march really became an opportunity to change hearts and minds, in the words of the March for Life, to unite, equip, and mobilize the pro-life movement. And so that's what the March for Life has really become, a rallying point, an opportunity to come together, to look around and to see other people who are concerned about this issue. And so that's the role of the march now, kind of after Dobbs, post-Roe, to continue to change hearts and minds, to build unity. But it's in January. And so then we can go forth into the states during the rest of the year to bring that message into state capitals. And so the March for Life organization has organized now upwards of 10 state marches, and over the next 5 or 6 years, hope to be in all 50 states in the District of Columbia as well, to be able to advocate for life and to speak out for life.
The Knights of Columbus has long had a presence on college campuses in the U.S. and Canada, but also around the world. Many young men join the Knights in college, and our work there offers an important insight into the mission of the Knights and our future leaders. Here to talk about our important work with this next generation of Knights and an important recent event attended by 17,000 college students is Nicholas Holloman, Knights of Columbus Manager of College Councils. Nick, thank you for being with us.
Great to be with you, Jonathan. Thank you.
So maybe we could just start by talking about how many college councils, about the program, what you do. Why don't you just give us some background into the work of the college councils?
Sure, be happy to. So I am Nick Holloman. I'm the manager of college councils for the Supreme Office. A lot of people are unaware that we have a college councils program until they encounter some of our college Knights at one of our college councils. But we do, in fact, have around 150 active college councils in the United States and Canada. We're actually worldwide, as is the order. We have in total around 300 active councils all over the world, including the Philippines, Central America, and the U.S. and Canada, of course. So our college Knights, really, they're Knights of Columbus, just like you might think of at your local parish. They're carrying out the work and the mission of Father McGivney on their college campuses all over the world. And really, they're a strong source of brotherhood on their campuses for college Knights, for young Catholic men who really are living in sort of a hostile environment for young Catholics.
We hear a lot about the rise of people who have no faith or don't believe in anything transcendental among young people. But here we are, the Knights on these campuses, and we're actually growing. Tell me about why are people coming to the Knights? What's making it attractive to this next generation of leaders?
Sure, I think you're right that we've heard a lot about the rise of the nuns, so-called, not N-U-N-N, but N-O-N-E-S. And I think that may be true in a lot of cases. A lot of people have sworn off organized religion, especially on college campuses. But when you do that, there's still a yearning in the human heart for the mystical and for that which is God, whether you acknowledge it as God or not. So I think there is a certain searching that you just see in general among young people. And some, I think oftentimes that's misplaced. But in terms of young Catholics and our college Knights, because their peers have turned away from religion, they're turning in on it much harder and much more fervently, and with a great deal of passion for the faith and excitement. And just as Father McGivney had a great deal for souls, I think you see that a lot among our young Knights. And I think it's precisely because the culture is pointing them in the opposite direction, and they're turning back towards the faith.
So you and I had the privilege of seeing each other at a pretty important event this year. It's an event that gathers something like 17,000 young people, I think, were there. It's called SEEK. It's sponsored by the Fellowship of Catholic University Students. We've been sponsors for a number of years. These are good friends of ours. We have a booth there. So tell me how you experienced the Knights of Columbus presence at this big gathering of Catholic college students. How were we thought about? What did you hear people who came up to the booth say? Did we meet some of our fellow Knights? Did people join us? Tell us about what happened.
Sure. Yeah, so we did have a booth at Seek this year, and I'll say our booth was very popular. We were so busy at the booth, I really didn't get away to go to any of the talks, which is a good problem to have, I suppose. But yeah, I would say the mix of folks that approached us at the booth it was probably a good half and half, either guys that were college knights, and they know who we are and they love us. But then on the other hand, those that weren't college knights, a lot of them don't really know a whole lot about us. So this was a good opportunity for a number of young men at the conference, I think, to have a first exposure to the Knights of Columbus. And I think really, especially among young people, there's sort of a misconception that we're your father's or your grandfather's organization. So really, what a great opportunity this was for us at Seek to change that perception and to challenge that perception, especially when these young men see their peers, many of them who are college knights, who are Knights of Columbus, gathered together there at Seek.
Is there any particular perception that you say was the most surprising to people? So they'd come and say, tell me about the Knights. Was there one or two things you said that just sort of blew them away? Like, I had no idea kind of thing? Was there anything stand out?
I think the biggest thing that stands out is when people learn about our founder, Father McGivney. They're really blown away. And young people especially are attracted to the Knights of Columbus precisely because of Father McGivney. And that might shock a lot of people. You might say, well, what do college kids in 2023 have in common with a priest that was around in the late 19th century? But actually, I think his story is really inspiring to them. If you think about it, he was a young priest, and he was living at a time when all of these Catholic immigrants were coming to the United States, and they were facing a lot of resentment. They were in a really hostile environment, and he wanted to keep them in the faith in an environment that wanted so desperately to pull them away from the faith. I think that resonates a lot with college students, that story, because they too are in the same sort of environment. Maybe the tactics of the devil are a little different today and different on the college campus, but the end is the same, to pull young people away from the faith. And so when they learn about Father McGivney, I think they see a connection to his challenges.
That's great to know, and we continue to pray for his canonization, and we'll keep doing that. You know, another thing we were able to do with this was to show some of the resources we've produced to help young people pursue Christ, to help everyone, frankly. Into the Breach, which has been out for a while, but we get to feature it at an event like this. But also the new Mother Teresa movie that's now been out a couple months, but I know a couple hundred young people came to see it. From my experience being there, people were impressed by these. Did you get a chance to talk to anybody about Into the Breach or Mother Teresa?
Yeah, so certainly Mother Teresa was very popular. The documentary was shown, I think, on maybe the second or third night of the Seek conference. And we had about 300 attendees show up to watch the documentary. So it was very popular, and I think it drove a fair bit of traffic and interest to the booth. And of course, when they come to the booth, they find, various things that we have to offer as far as formation materials go, Into the Breach being one of them. And of course, that's something that young college knights and that students in general are very interested in. This year, we made a big push to give out the Vivat Jesus prayer book. So that was something that had an incredible response among folks that showed up to the booth. For those that are listening that may not be aware of what that is, it's a sort of a daily prayer planner for Knights of Columbus, and really for anybody that picks it up, to be honest. But the idea is that it helps you to build out a really intentional and structured and a regular prayer life. So it's a great value to our Knights of Columbus, I think, and especially encouraging them to pray daily and to pray consistently.
So Nick, if I'm watching this and I want to join the Knights on a college campus, or maybe I'm a parent and wants my son to look into the Knights, where do I go to get more information?
Sure thing. Yeah, just give us a visit at www.kfc.org/college, or you can shoot us an email at college@kfc.org. We're pretty easy to find. If you take a look at our website, you'll get a really great overview of what college Knights are doing. We have a lot of great videos highlighting various programs and activities that college Knights are doing. But yeah, get a hold of us in either of those two ways, and we'd be happy to help you start a new college council on your campus, or to help you get your son involved in a local college council.
Well, Nick, thanks for taking time. Thanks for the great work you're doing. We continue to pray for the success of the college Knights.
Thank you, Jonathan. Vivat Jesus.
At the end of 2020, Joseph McGivney, a relative of Blessed Michael McGivney, experienced a health crisis brought on by alcohol abuse. Facing the need for 24/7 care for the rest of his life, he instead experienced an incredible recovery, a recovery he attributes to the intercession of Blessed Michael McGivney. Let's take a look at his story of return to health and faith.
When I look at where I was before, fear was just a big part of who I was. I just kind of stopped going to church. When COVID kicked in, that desire to drink just really took over my life. The company I worked for closed every office, and my way of coping with all of that was to drink more. My body just completely surrendered.
He was all disoriented and he collapsed. I decided to take him to the emergency room.
I didn't really know what to expect. Even though he was able to speak, he's not forming coherent sentences. I didn't know if he was able to operate on his own. It was horrifying.
I spent a few weeks there being detoxed from alcohol. Most folks come back out, and that didn't happen for me. My health had reached a point where I was psychotic.
Joe's Aunt Jerry, she's a nurse, and she would relay things back to the doctors and nurses for me. They didn't think he was going to recover. And they diagnosed him with Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, which caused all these neurological, physiological effects. He was hallucinating. He didn't even know who I was. You have to start looking into long-term care facilities because this is how he's going to be, probably, the rest of his life.
They tried everything and nothing worked. A switch was flipped and I was normal.
Kind of just showed up at the door, gave him a big hug, and it was just a wave of relief.
Just a couple of days ago, he wasn't able to feed or to dress himself. How could this possibly be?
Spoke to Aunt Jerry, and she started sobbing. She said, I prayed to Father McGivney to save you. Do I think that intercession is Father McGivney's work? And in my heart, I know it is. As far as we believe is my great-grandfather was Father McGivney's third cousin. Wait a minute, I may be related to this incredibly saintly man. My belief in God suddenly became really, really important to me. This horrible life that I had suddenly found myself in, and turning that over to his care sounded like a really good idea. I felt in that moment what I believe was his presence.
He has completely changed as a person. He seems to just be happy.
He has a different perspective on life.
My priorities now became my family, my faith. I decided to join the Knights. It is evident that these are people that put a high priority on serving others. Joining the Knights gives you the opportunity to do that.
Seeing my dad go to these community service opportunities became something I could do with my dad. I became a member of the Knights of Columbus, and it's really inspiring and motivational to helping the community.
The ability for me to honor Father McGivney through the works that are done by the Knights is really humbling and overwhelming.
I previously spoke with Joseph McGivney, brother knight and relative of Blessed Michael McGivney, about his healing. Let's take a look at that conversation. Joe, thanks for being here today and taking the time.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. I'm happy to be here.
So tell me a bit about what your relationship with God is before all this happened and how it then changed. But give us just sort of a picture of life before the miracle.
Sure. I was born and raised Irish Catholic, was baptized for communion, confirmation. So I would say I was always a believer. I knew the words to the prayers. But I, at that point in my life and into my adulthood, when people would talk about, having a personal relationship with God, I didn't know how to do that. And as a result, I was somewhat controlling, somewhat self-centered. And as I progressed through adulthood, while my belief in God never never ended. I didn't know how to make a connection with him. I just didn't have that blueprint. Or maybe part of it too was because of my kind of selfishness. It just wasn't that important to me. That all changed obviously when I, had that spontaneous, miraculous healing, and then soon after learned all the details of what had happened to me. I had this overwhelming desire to create that connection. And I learned to do that initially through being a part of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, which, in a quick summary, people always say your disease, your alcoholism will lead you to AA, but AA will lead you to God. And that's what happened for me.
I want to ask you about Father McGivney in a minute, but before I do that, not everyone has a story to tell of a miraculous healing. And what I find interesting about your story is you don't actually remember the moment, the process by which you went through this amazing healing. But you knew afterwards you needed to develop a relationship with God. So to all the people who are watching this, who are maybe where you were before and just saying, I believe in God, but I don't know him personally, what would you say to them just in terms of do these things? Or here's a way to, if you want a personal relationship with God, here are the steps, so to speak. And not because you need a miracle and not because you're even necessarily dealing with addiction, but just what are the steps to growing in intimacy with God?
Well, for me, in my case, and I'll speak to my personal experience, it all, you mentioned steps, it all began with going through these steps in the program of AA. The third one being made a decision to turn my life and my will over to the care of God. Well, based on the brokenness that I was experiencing after learning about the pain I had caused so many people, making that decision to turn it over to his care sounded like a really good idea. But I didn't know quite yet how to get there until a very kind therapist was in the facility where my awakening occurred. As I was being discharged, she said, "Joe, I'm going to pull up something on my screen," and she Googled surrender prayer, and up popped this very long prayer. She said, "Joe, promise me when you get home, you'll print this prayer and you will make it a part of your everyday life." And at that point, I said, I'll do that. I'm thinking, what do I have to lose? Because obviously everything I've done so far didn't work very well. So that surrender prayer over time became just a part of who I am. And I finally started to feel that real relationship. And I started seeing and learning over time that if I just had the strength to surrender it all to God, that all these beautiful, wonderful things just kept happening in my life. And, to this day, that surrender prayer, and then that process of surrendering it all over to God is a part of my everyday life. In my world today, when being human, when I start to become selfish, when I start to become anxious, when I start to get sideways, as I say, that surrender prayer, I may pull that one out 3 or 4 times in the same day. And it always brings me back to this feeling of peace. And frankly, my life has been so filled with joy and wonder since I turned it all over to God. I only wish I had learned how to figure that out decades ago. But here I am today, and so grateful that I have that relationship now.
So Father McGivney, obviously of interest to the Knights and all of us, is a big part of this story. I wonder if you could just tell us in brief, what's his role in all of this, and what's his continuing role in your life? You're a knight, your son's a knight. You're talking to a bunch of knights on this show. Tell us about Father McGivney and what he means.
Well, I mean, for me, and there's no question in my mind, no question, that Father Michael's intercession led to where I am. And the way that came about, after I had had my healing, and I'm now trying to figure out how to live my new life, it became really important for me to start serving others. And I knew of my connection to Father McGivney. And so I decided to join the Knights after all these years. And soon after, I was having a conversation with my Aunt Jerry, who was the nurse, again, that had quarterbacked my care. And Jerry had a particular devotion to Father Michael. And in our conversation, I was very excited. I said, Jerry, guess what? I signed up to become a member of the Knights of Columbus. And she, I was expecting her to be really happy. And all of a sudden I hear she started sobbing. And she said, Joe, you have no idea how overwhelmed I am with joy. She said, because when you were sick, I was praying to anyone who would listen, but I was praying devoutly to Father Michael. She said, in fact, we were on a phone conversation. She said, Joe, I'm looking at his picture right now. So what Father Michael has meant to me and continues to mean to me today, I believe he is a very powerful intercessor. Each day I pray, read that prayer, right from the prayer card right here. I read the Father McGivney canonization prayer, and I now have a kind of very ongoing list of other folks that need a miracle that I pray for. And I pray that Father Michael will intercede on their behalf. So that's, Father McGivney is a part of my everyday life now.
The Knights of Columbus have produced a new documentary film titled In Solidarity with Ukraine. It follows the organization's immense humanitarian efforts in support of the people of Ukraine following the Russian invasion in February of 2022. The documentary can be viewed on ABC-affiliated stations across the country through a partnership with the Interfaith Broadcasting Commission. To learn more about the film, including where to watch it, you can visit ukrainefilm.com. Let's take a look at this important new film.
It has happened. This is Ukraine's capital. What seemed unthinkable in the 21st century is now underway.
Repercussions of this war, since they have displaced so many, will be devastating.
Боялися навіть вийти з хати. Дорога була теж небезпечна і страшна. То не фільм, то реальність. I just hope that people who I love will be alive.
Solidarity in the presence of the church is something that is connected to a global, universal community.
I was encouraged by so many individuals and organizations coming together to help Ukraine.
In prayer, we are united for the cause of the peace of Ukraine.
The Ukrainian nation is undergoing such a tragedy. We cannot change those circumstances, but we can say, I am with you.
Each month, our Supreme Chaplain, Archbishop Laurie, presents a reflection and challenge for Knights to live during that month. The Supreme Chaplain's monthly challenge is a great way for Knights to put perseverance into practice and grow in faith and fraternity. You can always find each month's challenge at kfc.org/monthly-challenge. And here's Archbishop Laurie to issue his monthly challenge for March.
My brother Knights,
For my Supreme Chaplain's monthly challenge for the month of March, the scripture passage comes from the Gospel reading for the Mass on Sunday, March the 5th. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Rise, and do not be afraid." Do not be afraid. We read these words often in Holy Scripture. Here Jesus speaks to the apostles, awestruck at his transfiguration. In a similar way, the angel told St. Joseph, "Do not be afraid to take Mary, Mary who had conceived the Christ child, as his wife." The knowledge that God is with us should encourage and strengthen us. Sometimes, as with the apostles, we can be overwhelmed by the mysteries of faith. At other times, the challenges of living our faith in a secular culture seem daunting. Yet Christ continually empowers us as he calls out to us, "Rise and do not be afraid." For the month of March, during which we celebrate the feast of Good St. Joseph, I challenge you to watch the documentary St. Joseph, Our Spiritual Father, reflecting on St. Joseph's courage. Second, I challenge you to participate in the Faith in Action Pilgrim Icon program, which features an icon of St. Joseph. As you undertake this monthly challenge, I ask you to reflect, what are you afraid of? Do your fears prevent you from fully following God's will in your life? How can you imitate the courage of St. Joseph? God bless you as you undertake this monthly challenge. Vivat Jesus.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Nightcast. Once again, you can find this episode and all episodes on demand at kfc.org/Nightcast. You can also find Nightcast on Knights of Columbus social media channels. Also, if you have thoughts, suggestions, or comments on Nightcast, we'd love to hear them. Just send an email to nightcast@kfc.org. Thanks again for watching. We hope you can join us for the next episode of Nightcast. Viva Jesus.